Hello, in this lesson we are going to cover the uses of blockchain on the health industry. And this is definitely an industry that needs innovation. It needs to be fixed. There's a lot of problems within this industry, and blockchain can really help those problems. So the first thing that it can really help do is store patient records. They might be thinking, oh, patient records are already stored, whether they're in paper form or in some digital form. And you're right, they are already stored. It's not like people are trying to just memorize every patient's record on the planet. But let me tell you some examples. So when I was at university, I clearly didn't know how to do a U at university. When I was at university, I moved to a new accommodation, and when I moved, I registered at the local surgery. I'm in the UK. That's the way you have to do it. When you move, you have to inform them, one, so they know which one is your new main surgery. And when I got there, and this is the first time I was doing it, so I was 18 years old at the time, and I registered with a local surgery. They said they need my old records. Fair enough. Naturally, they're going to want the records. And they said they have to get them from my old previous surgery, and I actually had to contact them to send them over. And the process was just so frustrating and terrible. Instead of just being able to say, okay, this individual is in the UK, he has just moved, let's just access the records via some sort of government based system, which is the way it really should be done. No, again, it's not saying that all of the records were completely just stored by that one surgery. No, some of it was on a higher level, but some of it wasn't. And they had to contact that surgery. And then on top of that, so they had to contact my particular doctor there. And I think at the time he wasn't there. And as a result, that just delayed things. And at university, I also moved again several times, through the different years. I also moved to London to do a placement year when I was working for a year. And the surgery that I had to do the same process again there was was like really bad. The system was there, and it took them like I think almost 3 months to get me registered. So I remember I was ill, and the surgery was like, oh, now we can't really help you because we don't have your records. They say you can go to the hospital and you can just wait there, and I just had to wait there for hours. But the local surgery was saying you can either wait here and it'll take you a long time, or go to the hospital at the time, which was nearby. So that was ridiculous as well. So you can help have patient records, have a proper audit trail, and actually have access to them, regardless of what surgery you go to, regardless of where you live. Even it could go beyond countries. Another example is refugees, and this is a very upsetting example because we got countries like Syria and Iraq, and there's other countries as well that are war torn. These are war torn countries. Unlike my example, my local surgery had my records, but people that are fleeing these countries, so they are fleeing countries, hence why they're refugees, they may no longer have access to their medical records. So perhaps the surgery or the institution that was, let's say in Syria, for example, that had these medical records might be gone now, or the actual new country, maybe they're in Germany or in the UK or in America, wherever they are, they might not be able to access those records. And I think what's even more troubling is, what if somebody were to flee from, let's say, Syria? So they flee from Syria, and maybe they've lost all their family, and they get to a new country, they cannot access the hospital or the doctors cannot access the medical records, and let's say within 1 year they die due to some sort of illness that was easily curable if they had the medical records. And this can happen, and I don't know for certain if it has happened, don't quote me on it, but I'm sure there have been cases where this has been a problem, and this ultimately leads to it costing more money. So the refugee crisis, people moving over, is obviously a major deal, and not just refugees, just moving in general. So the example that I gave at university, this will link in with this. And also if I'm moving from one country to another, so I'm in the UK, maybe I move to America, live there for, 1.5 years. From there, I go to China and live there for, let's say, 6 months, go to Russia, and then maybe I go to Germany, and then I go to a few other countries. If all of this is accessible by anyone, when I say anyone, I mean like you as the patient can access your records, doctors that are meant to be accessing it can access it, and other medical professionals and facilities can access it. That's what I mean by anyone. Anyone that should be able to can access it regardless of where you are or where you was when these records were kept. It'll be an amazing thing. So that is another cool thing. So this, I've just zoomed out. So this ultimately leads to global access, which is the true nature of blockchain and of what we want for the medical industry. So that's the patient records. Does it go beyond just patient records? And yeah, it does. You can see a history, obviously, of the patient records, but also of doctors, nurses, and just other people in general within the medical industry. You can see where they studied, for example. You can potentially see what they've specialized in, potentially even who or what sort of cases they've actually dealt with. So maybe you have a heart specialist and you find that he's actually never done any surgery at all. He's all theoretical, and you're thinking, I want someone that's actually, been hands-on with somebody and actually maybe done a heart transplant or, operated on somebody's heart. So you can see a history of doctors. So this is great from a patient perspective and a medical facility perspective. So you can see how good they are, almost like a professional better CV. So that's another cool thing. And in the previous video, which covered the uses of blockchain for retail, we talked about the supply chain ledger. Feel free to go and check that video out. But the supply chain ledger allows you to track where products have been, what materials went into those products, where those materials have been, who handled them, who delivered them, who stored them, what conditions they were stored in, what materials made up those materials, etc., etc., till you get to the root material, which potentially may have been mined from the ground. And you can do the same thing with this. So you could use the same supply chain ledger technology that is in retail, that could be used for selling jumpers, for example, for tracking medicine. So you can see the ingredients that go into the medicine, the equipment used for the medicine, how it's been stored, where it's been, and how old it truly is. Because even though it might have an expiry date, depending on how it's stored, it might last longer. So it might be it'll last for 1 year, but if it's stored in a particular way, it could last for 5 years. So it would help reduce waste. So that's a really cool concept. So we won't just be going based on the overall date. We could say, okay, we need to get rid of this medicine because it's been stored in this poor condition. Therefore, it could actually do more harm, cost more money. So that could eventually reduce cost. Or perhaps it's being stored very well, maybe at the right temperature and not the average temperature, let's say, in a hospital, and as a result, it lasts longer. You can do the supply chain ledger for anything, so equipment, drugs, so medicine and drugs will be tied together heavily. All of this will lead to the authenticity of that good, and to see how pure it is as well in the case of a drug. Another thing you can track is organs. So you can see the sort of person that had that organ. So maybe you're getting a lung from somebody, and even though that individual had a lifestyle that didn't harm the lung, but maybe their family members either had a lifestyle or they had conditions that might affect it. So you can not just track where the organs have been, but also the conditions they've been kept in beyond sort of like temperature and the actual physical conditions, but the people that were involved as well. So that's a pretty cool thing to be able to track. And now, in this amazing world we live in, we have handheld medical equipment, and usually the handheld medical equipment is isolated equipment, but this could be used to access all patient records, and that would be amazing, because whether it's, let's say, a really professional handheld device that only doctors use, or something as simple as a phone, because phones have amazing sensors now. They have sensors to be able to check how your heart rate, to be able to check how fast you're moving, the sort of movement you're doing. So if you're exercising, how many calories on average you've lost. So using these sensors, all of this could be stored on the blockchain. So it could go beyond what a doctor or somebody in a medical facility is storing. And you might be thinking, okay, because it's at the moment, it's a lot easier to fudge that data, good or bad. Would that be stored with the other data? I would say be stored as like a separate piece of data on the blockchain, saying this is, for, let's say, from the consumer's device, and as a result, it has less weight, but it does have a impact, and the doctor can see, or or any medical professional can see that, okay, beyond the half an hour that they see the patient every 2 months, how they've been going on over the last 5 months or every 5 years or so, and how your device has been tracking you, not just when you specifically try to track something, but just in general, so your everyday to day. So this overall leads to reduce in costs, better record keeping, which will lead to help track clinical trials better. Instead of just saying, oh yeah, these drugs have passed clinical trials, but what were the clinical trials? How many clinical trials, let's say, has that company done? Who was involved in the clinical trials? How trustworthy are those people? Again, it's all about an audit trail, just going down to the root aspect. And another cool thing is the Internet of Things. So having devices connected to the internet, and especially automated. Because imagine if you, for example, every week need to go to a medical facility, and you need a machine hooked up to your heart, for example, and it needs to do something. And you want to go on holiday, maybe for a month, or you need to go somewhere for a month, and you're no longer going to have access to that medical facility. But there's other medical facilities. With the Internet of Things, what could happen is you could go to that other medical facility using the blockchain. You could get data of the patient, what that device has been doing. They could just go there, essentially put in the patient's details in, aka the name, and a few other pieces of information to get their records up. They could get that data, see, okay, this machine is actually doing this to the patient, and as a result, they need to have this machine hooked up. So they could hook up the machine and it could just automatically do it without having to be set. And if that were to change, for example, if maybe they figure out that the dosage or whatever they're doing needs to be reduced, then what they could do is just put down to the blockchain. So when they go to the facility or a different facility next week, and maybe they travel to a different country, it would have those new records, and as a result, it would provide accurate health care. So accurate health care, and this is automated, so that is an amazing aspect. And last thing, and this is a question you might have on your mind: who will build it? Should an individual build it? Should a company build it? No, not an individual or a company should build it. Neither should a government or anything like that. It should be a consortium. Realistically, that's the way it should be. It should be a consortium of global governments, of global companies, global institutions, global academic institutions, global people, and as a result, try and make it as uncorruptible as possible. Have as many different people with different mindsets as possible, so there's not just this one agenda, whether it's for profit or whether it's just trying to manipulate records or manipulate people's perception of the health industry. So it needs to be a consortium, and I think that's the case with any blockchain global network for any major industry, especially the healthcare industry. But ultimately, if it's a global network, it needs to be created by a consortium of people, companies, countries, governments, institutions, academics from all around the world. So this has just been a video on the use cases of blockchain in the health industry. I know we've covered a lot, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out or go with the video again and check out the concepts that we covered. And as usual, thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in my next awesome blockchain video.